Chinese migrants. And so I thought I'd start off with reading a poem from this first book and then move to the new book that Steve cited. This poem is an elegy for my grandfather, and it really was, it kind of started the book for me. Elegy. Of Babel's moon, I have notes. It was a marked card. It lit a chandelier out of an acacia. The trowel glinted with it. Crickets were out too, and as if they sight red stars, settled into leg kick song. A light wind blew seed into the web between tines of a hay rake. A soldier stood letting his horse drink well water from his helmet. The moon trembled in it. There was nothing forsaken about it. It simply issued a shadow while burnishing a surface. This morning, I read that when returning from a trail, Thoreau knew he had had visitors by what was left behind, a wreath of evergreen, a name in pencil on a walnut leaf, a willow wand woven into a ring. Its path not without disruption, the moon in its orbit tethers and tethers again. The morning of the funeral, my father dressed my grandfather. From the eyelet, each button new to full, the ties not loose, as if it had swallowed a small bird. So as Steve mentioned, I have this new book coming out, and it's called Tripas. And I was telling Ari before the reading that it's coming out in 2023, and while I've read into the years from it, I'm still not sure how to read from it as a book, and so I'm just gonna, I got the proofs recently. And so I printed them out, and I thought I would just start with the beginning poems. I'll say that the book centers around my Chicana grandmother, who worked 30 years on the factory line for a Motorola plant in Phoenix, Arizona. Also, it centers around my Chinese father and grandparents who owned a corner store in my Nana's barrio. And that's how, in that barrio is where my parents met. So it's narrative, it's lyric, it's kind of a memoir in some ways, but I like to think of it as a memoir that is underscoring the OIR at the end of memoir, so oír, the ear. It's a memoir attentive to sound. Teléfono roto. They say her cry is heard near water. My Nana says she heard the story first as a child, and then years later on the line at Motorola, from a woman raised near Bisbee. Chismes y dichos, hearsay, as they inspected the endless circuitry through microscopes. Fordisms, orders, overseers, and foremen told her they would make phones that fit inside a pocket. Yo no le creía. If we remove their cases, the verbs creer and to create share similar wirings. Some of those components were washed, degreased with toxic solvents, trichloroethylene, that Motorola for years spilled and flushed ceaselessly, carelessly. A plume of poisoned groundwater stretches beneath Phoenix from the East Valley to the west, past downtown where my father ran his store, a tiendita called Faye's, but that many knew as Los Chinos. After a 9-year fight with cancer, my father passed away in 2018. In 1989, Motorola moved the production line my nana worked on to Mexico. Once the company was served with fines for what's now a Superfund site, we might trace this production line from Phoenix to Guadalajara to subsidiaries in Guangzhou, where my father's family emigrated from. First, my Yeye in his 20s, and later my Ying Yang and Aigu in 1948, the year the first transistor was invented. I might hear in that technology my family's song in broken pieces, bits of gossip like a game of telephone or Chinese whispers. Your own, cries Yorona from those little phones inside our pockets. The section begins with an epigraph from Juan Felipe Herrera. Are we are the letters, mamita? Óyeme, are we are the ones inside the words? Code switches. Como se dice, my circuitry sews me, me cose, word by word and dictate. masa cooked. She said her eyes are china. The vowel switched on an aura, a shine that sheens the threshold. The vowel was spell, an eye that might we, an eye that echoes how we're seen and see. Identity. Ay Dios, she exclaimed. Eyes, an owl's eyes and ojos, and one in its lid turned sideways, mu. I wondered with her at the table where we placed one olive, ojo negro, in each hoja, that worn folio for field corn's field notes. What does that dark eye in the ear's husk see? My bisabuela, my great-grandmother, had a tiendita also in the barrio, and they sold raspados. And it's conventionally gendered with an O, masculine, raspados. But in my family, curiously, it's gendered feminine, raspadas. So this poem's called Raspadas. A keening sent throughout Vario Campito. Nana Chayo's grinder crushed block ice for her raspadas. Just west of Stockyard Slaughter and Union Pacific tracks, she too conducted that silver arm in her home's small storefront, feeding ice to shaving teeth. In Raspar, hear her voices saw scratch and wood fire below enameled pots. Ronco, my nana, her daughter, says when I call up enfermo. Bronco and bronchitis and those roping winds in mesquite. Open opera, these trees hoarse with asthma. Welga came too from pant, blow, and breathe. Bellows resist, so in 72, when Huerta and Chavez came to Campito for his fast at Santa Rita Hall that summer, amid monsoon, no less, they chanted with Coretta Scott King and John Baez, Si se puede, across the street from my nana's tiendita y raspadas, con leche, con piña, con fresa. She poured flavors from bottles lit like church glass. Up from Sinaloa, 1917, she came bird breast to her breasts, bra pinioned wings, smuggling swaddled-tight cockatoos, silenced over the border with coos and seed. Rosario, entrepreneur, renter of tar roofs to gold-toothed cattlemen, stood over pit fire, ladling to sod farmers, tripe and hominy, and started out some years prior from lettuce cars packed, bound for markets east, swiping ice cakes for her raspadas, their bright rosary, our heirloom. Went by Chayo for short, rancheras from her radio. I once saw her shake out her dress and molt. This is called My Tata, My Li Po. It has an epigraph from Arthur Waley. The poems, then, are those of a man who, in the eyes of a society largely dominated by bureaucratic values, had completely failed in his career, or rather had failed to have a career at all. Lipo of loppers, extension cords, and carpenter's pants. Hammer's claw snug in its loop. Lipo of roach clips, porno mags, his ziplock of batteries, Lipo licking each nipple to test its charge, Lipo of Thunderbird, of Night Train, Juanito Stash, in the opinions not whole for his night sips, Lipo of Korean War. I joined to see the world, he once said, but they sent me to Albuquerque. He learned his drink in basic training, Nana says. Lipo of government checks, of hohokam sequias instead of any yang chi. Lipo of swollen knuckles from nuns' rulers for speaking his Spanish. Lipo of turnaround and net snap. Lipo of S-hooks where crescent wrenches hung like codfish. Lipo of cuidados and chingados. The rascuache lipo of cochinero. Lipo of saltillo tiles, terracotta tierra mia, awaiting square feet. Lipo who quizzed me, call and response. Do you know your times? I know my times, Lipo. Lipo of the X, the unknown, the adopted, the Indio, the crossing and extension of dimensions. X, the Spanish borrowed from the Greeks when translating the Arabic integer of algebra, that system reconciling the disparate parts, that calculus of Mexica and Chicano. Lipo of loose timing belts and palomas and barro, bitten to the something from nothing. Lipo of aloe and layups, lipo of scrap metal, miscut lumber, saved for the day when you needed them, his futurism. Lipo in that army photo with his best Jorge Negrete mustache. Though I can't see his wrist, the watch is wound, and I still hear the second hand sucking its teeth. Lipo of VFW, all-touch bank shots. Lipo of Pachuco and morning knuckle push-ups. Overdub. In the movie, the one-armed boxer, in order to teach his students balance, walks the rim of a rush basket. His judicious steps never overturn or buckle the thin wicker mouth. The temple pupils express awe, overdubbed with an English more or less than their lips shape. In one memory, I'm again before my tío's posters of Bruce Lee, and with a reverence often reserved for cave painting or ancient scrolls. I was disciple, learning what roughhousing made of home, cojones, más macho, more beans. My tío taunted to toughen me. Hardly fury, fists small as limes, I mimed the blows by nunchucks in a dresser mirror, where nightly he hung his gold chain and crucifix, a first communion gift. Listen, can you hear Tío? Just a teen say his Our Father before bed, while behind him Bruce Lee in a many-mirrored chamber stood open mouth with kung fu cry. In the movie's penultimate scene, the one-armed fighter lures his blind nemesis into an aviary, hoping to employ birds.